Good morning. I am Reverend Otto Concannon. I use he, him pronouns, and I have the joy of being the minister of this congregation. That was a beginning, right? The beginning of a church that's born every day. Let me tell you about another beginning. Humans landed on the moon in 1969. It's so cool. This was the beginning of humanity's quest into outer space and onto other celestial bodies. Of course, it wasn't easy trying to figure out how to go to the moon, trying to figure out how to do it. It was something that had never been done before. To land on the surface of the moon after launching themselves with enough power to escape Earth's gravity and travel 250,000 miles. And they had to do it all within the weight limit, as in everything had to be light enough for a huge rocket to send it off the planet, along with 3 men and all the things they needed. And then it had to get back up from the surface of the moon. And the original plan for the lunar lander, I have a lovely lunar lander model, courtesy of Jeremy Bateman. If you ever need Lego, you can ask him. So the original plan weighed too much. It was too heavy. The propulsion that was needed weighed so much in order to be able to get them back up off the moon. So the engineers had to work on this design, the ones who did it, had to spend a lot of time thinking about how to make the weight work, which meant rethinking whether or not they really needed all the elements that they put in the original design. So they took away everything that was not essential, like the seats, which was just a very out-of-the-box idea. Seats are just what you put in a spacecraft, right? But on the moon, where there's 1/6 of the gravity of Earth, your legs are perfectly acceptable shock absorbers to the landing. So lose the seats. It also turned out that the huge window, it had a huge window at the front. It was taking up a lot of weight. Did the astronauts really need this huge window? No. They just ended up adding a really small ones for them to see out for the landing. Okay. Maybe not what the astronauts would hope for, but it was actually still pretty great because it got them to the moon. My point is that the engineers had to spend time reimagining what was actually needed when they went to the moon. Because going to the moon was something that had never been done before. They didn't need to have seats. A thing that was just imagined would be in any mode of transportation. Their legs were what they needed. They had to be creative because they were doing something that had never been done before. I know you're all like, cool story, but why are you telling me this? Well, because this is also a beginning. We here are also trying to do something that's never been done before. We are pioneers in the work we do. There is no other church like us. I know that sounds ridiculous, and it probably is. I'm not in every congregation. And what does it matter what some small New England church is doing? It's not like going to the moon. But it does matter. Maybe just as much, maybe even more. Let me explain. Our church congregation counts as small with about 120 members. The average age of adults in the congregation is between 35 and 40. We have 60 kids in our religious education program, and roughly 25% of the congregation members identify as transgender or non-binary. This is rare. So many congregations struggle to attract families. So many congregations that are 2, 3, 4 times our size would do anything to have 60 kids. And that's not an exaggeration. And to have that many transgender and non-binary people in our congregation, who I might add don't really overlap with the families almost at all. I mean, I do, but that's maybe it. shows that we are doing something right when it comes to being welcoming to people who really have limited options when it comes to a spiritual home. And the fact that the power of the congregation rests with younger people, mostly, is unique and different, and shows that we are poised to continue to thrive well into the future, and that we are poised to show our sibling congregations across the country what it looks like to have younger people lead. But the fact that our church is so young is rare, and there are gifts to that. And you have done the work to make the congregation this way, a place where families really feel like they can bring their children, a place where transgender people can bring their whole selves, a place where we are working to become more diverse in other ways too. I've been impressed with the conversations we have about disability here, and have seen us work on what it would mean to be more welcoming of people of many different races and cultural backgrounds, and who are working to get maybe a few more older people too. So, because this is where you ministers talked, I literally posted on a Facebook group of all the ministers in the country, and I said, please, if you have similar demographics to any of these, the ones that we do, I would love to have a conversation with you. And there were a few who had some similarities, but nobody had a congregation with this kind of percentage of kids or trans people. Nobody in the UU world, at least. The biggest response I got was, I wish my congregation had that demographic. Other ministers literally ask me all the time, how do you do it? How did you do it? As if this is my doing rather than yours. I try to answer. I say a lot of things. The congregation, the history of church, including yours, especially yours, is that there were only 10 members in 2000. And then a few brave families came. And then, as it always happens, a few families saw other families. And then people came who were young, because people want to join a church where people look like them. And then here we are, this unusually young UU church. I talked to them about how we openly welcome children in worship in our welcome words and have made physical space for them here in our sanctuary. I talk about the brave choice you all made to call a transgender minister me 9 years ago, when being a transgender minister, even in UU contexts, was much more of a liability than it is now. I was turned down from a congregation for being trans. Yes, a church can legally do that. But all of you decided that you could. It was a risky choice, and it happened because you already had trans people, and then, of course, more came, because people want to join a church where people are like them. I talk about our location, an inner ring suburb, a diverse city with families, on a transit line. And those are some of the reasons that we are who we are. But there's another, more uncomfortable reason. And that reason is money. You see, young families and trans people, they don't have as much money on average as older white suburban people in their 60s, 70s, 80s, and beyond, who frequent most Unitarian Universalist churches. People with young kids also don't have the same amount of time to put towards efforts at a congregation as young retired people do. A congregation full of people who mostly work full-time can't provide the same kind of volunteer efforts. So the congregation was able to continue to exist in 2000 as it is able to exist today with a full-time minister and a music director and a director of religious education and an admin and facilities manager, roles that are often done by volunteers in other congregations our size, by using the endowment, the money our ancestors left us, so that this congregation didn't have to rely on the members of the congregation to fund its ministries, but rather on the money of our ancestors. The congregation became, in a way, this new church with the bones of an old one, with a building, a resource that could be rented and used for our ministries, and an endowment that could pay the people to do the work that most of our members didn't and still don't have time to do. Most. We have some who can, but most. And it made us possible for us to become what we are today, this unique congregation among UU congregations. But this gift won't last forever. We are wearing it down, and if we keep doing it at the rate we are going, we will run out of it within 10 years. And so what do we do? Well, we've got 10 years on this project that no one has undertaken before. How do we land on the moon? Do we need to get rid of the seats? All right, let's examine first why we exist. There's the reasons that you come to church on Sunday, the things that pull you out of bed to be in community, to sing together, to hear a good word, to be reminded that we are not doing the work alone. The UU minister, Reverend Mark Morrison Reed, wrote, "The central task of the religious community is to unveil the bonds that bind each to all. There's a connectedness, a relationship discovered amid the particulars of our own lives and the lives of others. Once felt, it inspires us to act for justice." Okay, but then why come here specifically to this Unitarian Universalist congregation? Well, what does it mean to be a Unitarian Universalist? Now, this might be a hard question for you, because you might come here and you might not even identify yourself with this religion. Should I put that in quotes? I don't think so, but you might. Or this faith. You might even feel uncomfortable with that word. But like it or not, Unitarian Universalism is what makes us different from Christian churches. It might be what makes us different from the church you grew up in. And there's something about it at its core that drew you here, that makes you stay. And you might say it's because it's not Christian, and maybe that's what brought you here. But the negation of something not being something, that's not enough. That's not enough to keep you here. You might say love. Love at the center is something we say a lot lately. You might hear people say love is the spirit of this church, words written by James Villa Blake and recited at many UU churches every Sunday, though not ours. Or if you've been involved in UU justice work, perhaps you've been told that we side with love, which is the name of the organizing strategy team of the Unitarian Universalist Association. Something that originally came from the idea that we're in support of marriage equality, but has grown to include so many other justice issues. But love alone, love without definition, isn't much good at all. It doesn't grab us in the way that God might and bring us to church. Love might feel good, but it might feel like a feeling and not a theological concept that makes us get out of our cozy beds on a Sunday morning and out of the comforts that come with not trying something new to be in community. Love might feel too squishy, too sentimental, too intimate. And yet, our Universalist ancestors believed that God is love. In the first letter of John, a book of the New Testament, it is written, "Whoever does not love does not know God, for God is love." And what does it mean? Clearly, the writers of the New Testament letter didn't believe that God was the essence of love or that God wasn't personified in some way, but our Universalist ancestors believed that a loving God wouldn't damn anyone to hell for eternity. An idea that was so radical that it was considered dangerous and heresy. And whether or not you believe this in a literal sense, there's a message here that we need right now. That a loving God, however you conceptualize it, would not damn anyone to hell. And so we shouldn't either, when hell on earth is a reality for so many people in our country and around the world. Maybe that's why you're here. Or maybe the church provides a space that we don't often have. If you've heard the term third space, the church is a form of that. A third space is that space that isn't your home or your work/school. A literal third space where you spend your time. It's a place that's inexpensive, centered around conversation and community, where you often see the same people. And since third spaces are places we choose, we get to experience real belonging in them. Third spaces have become more and more uncommon, especially ones where you can access without spending any money. Church is a place you can enter no matter what you can pay. Most other third spaces, coffee shops, bars, gyms, barbershops, you have to spend money to participate in. Library is exempted, of course. Church is a gift from our ancestors, yes, but it's also a gift from the people sitting in the pews next to us, in part because of the financial structures that have been set up to make it possible, but also because of the requests that come with it. Church demands of us. It holds us accountable. It asks us to live our values here and in the wider world. It gives us people who are similar to us and different from us and asks us to create belonging with them. The world can be a profoundly lonely place these days, and church is a remedy for that. Irish poet and theologian Padraig Ó Tuama says it best when he writes, "Belonging is not something you find, it's something you make." We are making belonging together. So yes, we are making something like this lunar module because we are making something that has never been made before. And we can do it differently than anyone has done it before. And we are. Our social justice work, for example, looks different than many UU congregations, so much so that I think sometimes people think we don't do any. But what have I told you about how many groups use our building at no or very low costs? Here's just a few this past month. Luce, the Ice Watch group in Massachusetts, has used our space for their meetings and gatherings. Science Club for Girls, an organization that provides STEM education for girls and gender-expansive youth from marginalized backgrounds, has a weekly program here. The Greater Malden Asian American Community Coalition has their ping pong club here. I think you've seen the ping pong tables. 4 days a week, 9 to 2, at very low cost. A group that provides community and belonging for Asian American seniors and has even won grants for their work to help prevent gambling in their community by providing an alternative. Bigger Bodies Boston, a group that works for fat liberation, has held a clothing swap here, where fat people are able to find clothes that work and fit their bodies in a safe community space. This is just this past month. There are dozens of other groups who have used our space in these ways, and every single time, the groups thank us for giving them this space where they can meet, and they said it's been the most helpful thing we could do for their cause. Another example, a few years ago, there was a crisis in Massachusetts and not enough space for unhoused families to stay in shelters. We did a lot of work to see if we could house people here in our congregation, and we inspired through that the Unitarian Universalist Association in Boston to open their building to house. That was us. We inspired them. I know, impressive. And they housed 25 families for several months during the crisis. We are also Pink Haven's fiscal sponsor. Pink Haven's an organization that helps trans people leave states that are unsafe for them, and we manage all of their money. We do this work, this concrete, supportive, not always showy work of making sure the building is open and making money transfers and being here. Which isn't to say we don't do the protests and more, but we do these things because that's what we're equipped to do. And more importantly, that's actually what people need. And as we grow, we need to figure out what these things are and what we're going to do differently. How are we going to be a church in these times with these people doing something that hasn't been done before? Maybe we lose the seats. Maybe we lose the windows. We can go to the moon, metaphorically. We just need to continue to think creatively. Love, justice, belonging. This is what our congregation is about. So this is how it begins. This future that we're imagining, the one for us and for all of us in this country. This future is ours. We get to envision it together. May it be so. Blessed be, and amen.